Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shelfcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me as always is Mark Ainley, founder and owner of DC Realty. Mark, look a little tan.
Yeah, I'm looking a little tan, but I'm starting to peel. So I went to San Diego last week. I complained for the first 2 days it was sunny, or was cloudy. And the third day sun came out, I got burnt within like 2 hours. So
My body ain't ready for it.
No, it definitely wasn't. And we'll blame it on San Diego sun's a little different than Chicago sun. So maybe we'll blame it on that too. But I went to the NARPM, National Association of Residential Property Managers annual event. It's called Broker Owner. I just love NARPM as an organization as a whole for property managers. It's nowhere near the size of Realtor, but the willingness that all of the owners within NARPM are to help other property managers share. Like, there's no secret sauce to be held back from. I feel sometimes in the real estate world and the brokerage side, there's a lot of brokers are like they have the secret sauce and they're worried about if you're gonna steal their leads or stuff like that. And it's just not like that in the property management world. So I definitely encourage anybody that's a property manager that's not part of NARPM. It's only a couple $100 a year to sign up and kind of participate with that. You'll get a lot from it.
Got it. If I just manage my own stuff, I manage, my own 20 units or whatever, is it still worth it? Or what's the minimum you need where you think this would be worth it?
Well, I think there's two ways you can approach this. I think NARPM has resources out there, like there's a podcast. There's a handful of podcasts around NARPM and NARPM members that are valuable that obviously you don't have to sign up for NARPM to be part of that. But I think the annual membership is $250 a year, and you get on the different, you get some inside resources. They have some classes and so forth. But if you only have a few units, I would take advantage of the resources. But if you're going to start managing for other people, I think, or consider that it's definitely a resource that you want to look into.
Man, some nice words there. We're going to have to hit them up for some sponsorship.
Yeah, I know.
All right, cool. What do we got for the housing provider tip of the week?
All right, I get to keep talking here today. Source of income. This came as one of the new protected classes here in Illinois. It was already a protected class in Cook County, but new across Illinois. And something I heard a few weeks ago that I never realized was the case, that source of income, a lot of that conversation ends up shifting around Section 8, right, and subsidy housing or other people paying. But source of income also protects people on unemployment. Now, I was telling Tom about this before. He's like, well, if someone's got 3 times the rent of unemployment, then that's a different set of questions you might want to ask. But, it might be a scenario where it is a Section 8 tenant where they only have a smaller portion and their unemployment will cover their portion. Or it could be unemployment makes up a portion of it, and then they might get disability and they might get some other sort of trust or some income. But all those things combined, more the tip here today is you cannot just outright say you can't be approved because you're on unemployment. So just keep that in mind. You could get in trouble for that, and I want to make sure no one's getting in trouble or violating fair housing. So
yeah, just to be clear, you can still look at it, and if they don't hit the numbers, deny them, but you can't just say no off the bat. Like, protect yourself legally.
Yes.
That's the point.
Yep, for sure. There's I don't know if loophole is even the right word, but there's let the scenario play out, and definitely don't put your marketing. We do not accept unemployment. So.
Cool. Let's dive in.
All right. We got excited guests here today. Excited to really connect with her about a month ago. So our guest today is a graduate of Illinois Tech's Architectural School. She's a realtor for 10 years and runs a one-stop design and sales group called MG Home Chicago at Properties. She's a builder and designer at heart, and renovations are her way of making herself and clients money. So we got a lot of good tips here coming. Real estate's just bricks and pieces of wood, but homes make money, she said. It's seeing the potential of how to make real estate into homes for the community is what was most important to her. Without further ado, I want to introduce Michaela Gordon. Michaela, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
All right, so before we get going, we need the icebreaker. Tell us a crazy story you had with an investor, or something crazy a Chicago investor's done that you can't believe happened.
Crazy story. This isn't even that nuts, but I convinced my sister when she was very, 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 very pregnant to buy a house with essentially not enough bedrooms for even her and her husband, let alone the kids they had. Um, all based on a concept that I knew I could take the roof off the house and build her a different house. So she gave birth like a week after I finished her house.
That is stressful.
I think I can do it.
So just to be clear here, we popped the top on like a bungalow or a ranch. What'd you do?
Yeah. Sort of like typical Chicago bungalow. Took the roof off of it, built a second story, put a new roof on top of that. Basically like rebuilt every single wall on the inside.
Giving labor in the basement. That's crazy.
Yeah. With the builders, it was really specific. Like, hi, she's giving birth on this day. House has to be done.
Yeah. No time for holidays here.
There's no wiggle. Yeah, like there's no wiggle. I need occupancy. I need like a bed. I'm going to need some things in here. And we have no wiggle room. And my sister bought into my crazy plan.
Well, there you go. Well, it all worked out, I assume, right?
It all worked out.
There you go. That's usually how these stories end. A little bit of stress, a little bit of sleepless nights, but at the end of the day, we're all still alive.
Yeah, it all works out, and like, the value is there. But I would say probably again, I don't know that like a random investor would have ever agreed to that insanity given their family situation. But luckily my sister did. So that's probably the weirdest, craziest.
It's full.
It could have made a rough next holiday. Failed on that one. So
right. And this is her first purchase ever. Like they had never owned property prior. And I was like, number one, I'm pretty sure I can make you a lot of money. Number two, I'd like to buy this house and take it apart with your money. Thank you so much.
So to have a level of confidence to get something done like that in those circumstances,
yeah.
I mean, take us back. Like, how'd you get to that point to be able to
do that? So like you mentioned, I am by trade an architect. So actually, I was listening to one of your episodes from a few weeks back. And there was a guy who's chatting about IIT as well. And no one on the planet knows about IIT. But I went there. And there is a somewhat famous architect, but it is pretty famous, but like no one really talks about it. It's a famous architecture school there, which is where I went. And so when I graduated from architecture school, I kind of instantly, I decided this even before I graduated, that I wasn't going to be sort of a true architect. And I kind of had a vision of what I could be instead. This is a world that HGTV didn't exist in yet. So this idea that you could have a real estate person and a builder and kind of a designer all in one person or one team wasn't really something that existed. Enter like the Joanna Gaines of the world, and now it's very normal. But it did not exist as a concept, and it definitely didn't exist as like a business model. But I felt like from a really simplistic standpoint, like I just could not comprehend how a customer is supposed to go, even an investor or owner occupant is meant to go into a property having no idea what they can or cannot do there, purchase it, then hope for the best, then get the designer, then find out they can or cannot do the thing they were going to do in order to make the sort of equity they were intending to make, whether they were going to flip it or whether they were going to put a tenant in there, all these things. You're going in blindly. And I just thought that made no sense. And so pretty quickly out of college, I got my real estate license and sort of finagled my way into a very large development where I designed the majority of the units. And then I sold the majority of the units. And so that building was like a 3-year, graduate school on how to be whatever it is that I am.
Yep. So did you know this was the path though? Like 22-year-old you, were you saying, yeah, I got to finagle way into real estate here. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, was this always pretty clear cut? Like,
yeah.
This is...
I definitely had a plan. Everyone around me could not comprehend what the hell I was doing. But I definitely had a plan of I was going to do them together and I was going to find a way to be a one-stop shop. But again, because it didn't exist, no one could understand how I could be a one-stop shop.
Got it. And then just more on the tactical side here, were you looking in other areas, right? Or were you saying, no, Chicago architecture is for me?
No, I definitely, this leads to something I'm doing right now as well. Out of college, I thought I would move to Los Angeles and sort of start some version of this there. Fast forward 10 years, I now have my real estate license in California, and I've been starting to build the same thing I've done here for 10 years there. But that only now just started in comparison to originally when I thought I might go out there right away.
Got it. Give us the unbiased opinion. California architecture compared to what we got here in the city.
It's super different. Can you guys hear that? I'm so sorry.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay. I think from a history standpoint and from like an unbiased beauty standpoint, Chicago wins. Chicago's lots are impossible and they screw everything up. If you can afford something outside of a 25 by 125 lot, then we're starting to have a discussion about true architecture. But our lots are very, very narrow. And because of that and the restrictions the city puts on how you can build and total square footages and things like that, new construction or even old construction that has to be retrofitted is stuck. It can't do what it wants to do or what it needs to do, and it can't evolve. So Chicago's architecture as a whole, if you look at the picture, better than anywhere else. If you start looking at it in a micro way, I think other places have a huge step up on us.
We've talked about this on the show in the past, 25 versus 30 versus 35 foot wide lots. Like how different of how wide, talk to us about kind of the different sizes of these smaller lots even. Like what's the big difference for you?
It's a huge difference, right? Like if you start to even talk about, something that is really important to me and what I kind of like run this whole business on is to sort of to what you said in the beginning is real estate is bricks and pieces of wood, right? But humans have to live inside of it, and we need to be able to have our daily lives happen there, our families meet there, all these things, right? And so it's all well and fine to say a lot has to be 25 feet wide, but when the city starts putting requirements on that of you have to have 3 foot setbacks, okay, 3 feet on both sides, or 25, or I'm sorry, 3 feet on one side, let's call it, or 25 and now 22. Okay, well, you need to have a staircase entering the property that likely takes you up a few levels. That also is 3 feet. So now you're at 18 feet. Did I do the math on that right? Yes, right? You're at 19 feet. Now the depths of the walls, you're at best, 17 and a half feet. So that means at best, your living room and likely one of your bedrooms cannot be bigger than that. You also need hallways in a property in order to like move from room to room. And because our lots are narrow and long, you end up having to have a hallway that runs the whole property, which then also means if you've got quote unquote 17 feet at best inside, 3 of those feet are for hallway. So now your room is even smaller, and now we're at 14 feet. And so the lots actually do matter. They're a huge difference. If you then take it even further to furniture sizes, right? You can have a couch that's 9 foot, and a 9 foot couch is actually not that large. Well, if your room is only 14 feet, this is starting to become really problematic. And so based on all these requirements, you're setting up architecture to have to be identical every time because people need beds and couches and tables, and they come in certain sizes.
Yeah. No, this is something over the last 18 months has been a huge thing that we've talked about. When we're flipping something and we're going to sell it over the 7-figure price point, you almost need that, right? Like if you, or the alternative is if you have like a bump out in the dining room and it stays out, it doesn't come back in. You pick it up there and it's grandfathered in, and you have maybe 19 feet in the front but 22 in the back. And then we found we have one right now where just this is more functional than architectural, but functionally upstairs, if you have 22 or 23 feet across, you can do side-by-side beds in the back, right? So all of a sudden getting a 3-2, in this one we have a 3-3, everyone gets an ensuite upstairs, right? Which if you were just that 2 feet makes it possible. Otherwise you have like a 9-foot bedroom, and when you saw that price point, can't do that. Like it's not acceptable.
Right. I mean, it's a huge deal. And so then if you go back to like Chicago architecture, we're basically Chicago as a city has this sort of label on it as the most affordable big city, right? You can get a single family house for $1 million, and that's a big house, depending on where you are in the city. But relatively speaking, it's a big house. There's really no other big city in the United States where you can get a single family home in a downtown market for $1 million. But there are restrictions on that. And so if you do start to want these houses that don't require you to live a certain way based on their widths, because they are what they are in their width, then you ultimately go to this premium price point, which then goes back to sort of the price points of other big cities. They don't have those types of restrictions. And so you do get these mega houses, but they also have huge price tags on them. But Chicago is basically saying, if you want a mega house, we'll also put a huge price tag on it. If you want a moderate big house, then you can have a nice price tag.
Yeah. And just to tie this to, a lot of our folks are investors on the rental market. They might say like, hey, well, this doesn't apply to me. It's like, this absolutely applies to you. I can tell you, you compare
on renters.
Yeah, like you compare, if I have a 3-unit on a 25-foot lot and one on a 30-foot lot, you can walk in there right away and know which one's on the 30-foot lot. Like it's obvious, right? Like it's such a better feel. That renter doesn't want that 8-foot, 9-foot width bedroom. They wanted 10, 12 with a bump out. Like that one's going to win all day long when apples to apples. It doesn't mean don't buy something on a 25. It just means, you can't compare it to that. Don't use that one as a comp. Don't use that as
price
what you're comparing yourself to. There is a difference there. You need to account for both ways.
It's not even like a little difference. It's like a drastic, this is like a whole different racket of house the minute you get off a 25-foot lot.
Yeah.
It's drastic. From an investor standpoint, I think it's important to, again, I think this is super important. I don't think all investors look at it this way, but this is kind of my shtick on the topic and why certain investors do come to me. You have to look at investment properties in two ways. They've got to make you your dollar value, but the best way they're going to do that is if they become the place that the renter, in an investor situation, the renter is bringing their family, is eating their dinners, is having, friends over and watching important games or movies or whatever that is, right? That's what keeps people in properties long term. That's what keeps the turnover rate for you low. And that's what gets you the highest dollar value per month on your rent. So it's all fine to say an investor is like, just look at the numbers. If the numbers work, I'm in. But it's not just that, right? If the property sort of like is the best opportunity for that tenant to have something that resembles a home, that tenant stays longer. And that actually matters to the bottom line of the investor, not just as much, but I would say very, very heavily, as much as, does the rent of that month cover my expenses and do I make my profit?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And it's one of the things I've realized with my own properties is like, look at the ones that are like this, I don't have turnover. Or if I have turnover when they go buy their own house.
Exactly.
I'm the natural stepping stone, and then they go buy their own home, and then the next person with a 750 credit score moves in, and it's beautiful. It works for everybody.
Yeah, you also get a different caliber of tenant.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we're talking about, kind of, these are bigger projects, these are guts. Let's say you're working with an investor who, they have a budget of, 30, 40 grand a unit, right? It's a vintage apartment, but we're not going to be taking down walls. We're going to live with the existing floor plan. You talked to us a little bit about just some of the ways you can help them modernize the apartment. Some easy wins, the low hanging fruit that you can help maximize their return.
So this is a very like millennial answer. So get ready. This is a very
you pull up your phone and everything.
Yeah, it's a very millennial answer. There are cheap and quick ways to make your unit Instagrammable, but the closer your unit gets to looking like an Instagram model, the higher rent you get. So what do I mean by that? Paint, tile, light fixtures, all of that gets your unit looking closer to like a West Elm ad. So when I call something Instagrammable, when I'm talking about a space, I'm talking about what you might see as an ad in a furniture store or like a trendy restaurant or any kind of space that tends to get eyeballs on it and people gravitate towards it. I call that an Instagrammable image. So a space, a 3D space, is just the 3D version of a 2D picture somebody is going to essentially buy the 3D space on. So the idea is to make the best 2D image out of the 3D space you have. And to give you specifics, I think paint, I think tile, I think light fixtures. I can't even necessarily tell you if you do those three things, you're good to go. Because I think in some spaces you don't need all three. I think in some spaces you need more than the three. I think if you go at it with the idea of maybe whatever space you've got, if you can find some kind of image somewhere in the internet that resembles your little corner of your apartment or your condo or your property, whatever it is, if you can create a little sort of vignette moment in your space, that is what's going to get people in the door. And that is what's going to keep people there. And that doesn't necessarily take money, and it doesn't have to be the highest quality product.
Got it. So then along those lines, picture some of these gray stones we have here. They have the old vintage wood, right? It looks awesome, but everyone's going to white. Talk to us a little bit about how you balance that old historic charm versus, hey, I want to modernize this, right? Without bastardizing it, without making it look terrible, right? Because I feel like even internally, we get into that discussion a lot, right? This is a lot of cool stuff here. How can we reuse it while still making this look, brand spanking new?
So I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. So a lot of vintage properties will have beautiful trim work. And like today, that to have that made how it was made then is astronomical in price. So you're not going to get rid of it for obvious reasons. And also just my architectural soul would murder you. So you can't there's a moral battle right there. That I have a moral line on that topic. You're not getting rid of it. But if it is a rental property and we're going after this Instagram image, what does that mean? That means that the trim just needs to be painted white. That means you sand off whatever polish is on it. It's likely lacquered at the moment. And you paint it white. If you have beautiful white trim all over, more people will gravitate towards that, for better or worse, than they will towards the natural colored wood at the moment. When you paint trim, if in 10, 20 years you don't want to paint it anymore, it gets sanded off, problem solved. You just need to paint it professionally and not, on your Saturday with 87 different brushes that show stroke marks and it looks awful. Have a professional do it. But you can paint trim. You can, if you've got dark wood, for example, I live in it's not brand new anymore, but I live in a concrete loft. And my job when I bought this property was, how do I reverse it to not feeling like a brand new concrete loft and give it some warmth and give it some texture that it didn't have? So that meant dark floors. I think that you can always take a dark floor palette and make it still feel really light and bright. Rugs, furniture. I'm sure you guys have talked about this with other investors, but the minute you stage something that leads down that road of making that Instagrammable vignette, which people are going to gravitate towards. The fact that the tenant gets in there and has no idea how to recreate that is not your problem. You need them to sign the lease. What they do after that, not your business. If you invest in the staging to make sure it is light and bright, those are also photos you can use for years on. So if you've got tenants and you're flipping tenants, great. Doesn't matter what that tenant has going on in there. You're using your old photos that you've invested in. Right now, for example, warm sort of earthy tones are really a trend, but they've kind of been on and off a trend for a very long time. So if you've got dark floors, get some of these lighter natural colors into the space. And those dark floors are just going to be a beautiful canvas for you to put something else on top of. You absolutely do not need to rip out those floors and put in the new wide plank fake wood floors. Please don't do that.
So as a real estate broker, you're taking your clients through these houses and basically on the showing, laying them out a vision. That's your
That's the shit.
superpower.
Yeah, that's the shit. I know what it can be in the end. I know how much money you have to get it there, and I know what we can buy it for to get you there with a profit.
It's a huge value. Talk to us about what like today's market looks like. Obviously, we all know about lack of inventory and lots more investors out there. Like,
Yeah.
how are you viewing this market? Or how are you finding opportunities in ways that other people are not?
I think this market's really hard. I'm going to be honest. I think it's hard as a buyer. I think it's hard as a seller. I think it's hard as a realtor. I think it's hard as a human being just trying to buy eggs. I just think it's all hard. Things are expensive and there is no inventory. And so I think people are getting a little more creative, which I like. I think some of the things I've talked about a couple of years ago that people weren't really terribly excited to like go and try, they're much more excited to go and try. For example, I toured a single family home, kind of it's downtown, but it's kind of in a weird bubble, a little quadrant that's a little funny. But it's a single family home. It's a big single family home. And its price point is somewhere in the realm of $1 million. But it's rented on Airbnb for $14,000 a month. Or it's not just renting, they're making $14,000 a month on it. So a few years ago when I had investors buying a 2-flat, and I said, I think you should Airbnb one of the units, and then I think you should put a long-term tenant in the other unit, because one gives you stability and one is going to churn your numbers. And the response was, oh, but how will I manage that? And it's so much work. And it would be so much easier if we just like put the one guy in and I deal with him once a month. Okay, but now your purchase price is higher. So now what are we going to do? Right? Now your mortgage is higher because the interest rate is higher. So now some of these things that do take a little of effort, but in my opinion, I actually think the upside is even higher than one thinks it is. Some of these things are now conversations that people are willing to have with me. Whereas before they were like, oh, that sounds great. And like, I'm sure I'll make money, but it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. When things were easier, right? When rates were lower, when, you would just default to the easiest way to make money.
Yeah.
Right. That's the default behavior. And now that doesn't exist. So right now, even like in our little world, like the rehabs I'm doing they just keep getting bigger, because to reposition an asset, it takes more and more work to create a spread. Right. Yeah. That's the risk and the effort that we have to put in to drive the same margin we did 2 years ago or whatever the case is.
Yeah. I mean, everything is more expensive. Like your labor to do the thing is more expensive. The materials are more expensive. To get into the damn property is more expensive. God forbid you take a mortgage, that's more expensive, right? Like all of your profit is being eaten up. So you've gotta get more creative. I was just thinking, when the real estate market kind of gets a little bumpy, all the long-term realtors say, no, this is fine. The newbie realtors who got in it because like their neighbor made a bunch of money and they're like, oh, I'll get a real estate license, make a bunch of money too. They leave the industry. And we're like, great, this is like our cleansing, and the ones that work, we all get back to ourselves. And it's back to our nice little bubble of people, and we all know how to transact. I think this market is going to do the same for the investors and the builders, right? The random investor who got into it because his neighbor made a bunch of money and he's like, oh, I can do that. They're not going to make the margin. And so they're not going to have the margin. So they're not going to make the money they anticipated. And they're going to be a one and done kind of guy. Those people who are like, no, I know what I'm doing. This is an ebb and flow kind of thing. I need to get a bit more creative on how I fill my units now. Or how I borrow, or whatever that looks like. I need to get more creative to make the same margin, but I'm willing to do the work because later it'll be that much easier.
The investors that are going to be kicked out of the market will be ones that will probably get hurt one way or another. They made a bad decision, or they underestimated an ARV and had to bring 20 grand to the table and so forth. So those people actually get hurt.
Yeah. All right, so we need to be more careful to hit the margins today. Talk to us about in the design or in the layouts, anywhere in the process, where do you see money being wasted, right? Where do you see, maybe not your clients, you walk in a house, like, why did they drop money into X? Like, what are some overspends that we can go without?
And this isn't even investors necessarily, okay, so let me also backtrack really quick. I think it's unfair to say that owner occupants are not investors. At least everybody I work with specifically, we look at real estate, whether you're living there or whether you're renting it out, as an investment, right? And so whether you're going to live there for 2 years and then sell it so you don't have to pay capital gains on it, or you're going to hold it for 10 years and have renters, or you're literally going to buy it and flip it in 6 months. And there's a big enough margin there for you to pay what you need to pay. I think everybody needs to look at real estate as an investor and from that mindset. So I won't say too much on this because I don't want to give them up. But I know some people who bought a property. They did not buy it with. I happen to be selling the property, and so they had a buyer's agent and they bought it for themselves. And they told me during showings what they were going to do to it. It wasn't my business to tell them. That made no sense because I wanted to sell the thing, and then my job was to sell the thing. So I gave them the best case scenarios of what they were trying to do, but I most definitely would not have told them to do that. And now they own it, and they're basically creating a second bedroom out of a space that should not be a bedroom and is not a good floor plan. And likely they're going to use the condo and whatever money they invested into making it what they need because they need the second room. On the sell, they're going to have to take it all down. And I do not generally like to tell my clients to build things in properties that then they have to spend money to take down in order to sell.
Yeah.
But this back to that conversation of people don't know any better, and the industry is not set up in a way that when somebody's buying something, they're coming with a builder or a designer, or they're not coming with those people to the showing to decide if they're going to buy it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You would be what I always call an investment-minded broker, right? Not many. I always say it's about 10%. Like, what advice would you give to whether it be a realtor that isn't focused on the investment side or just sells their neighbor's house? There's still tangible skills they could use, even if they're only selling owner-occupied houses, like you're saying. Like, what advice or what feedback would you give them to learn to? Is there any sort of like direction you can point them for those that are listening?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a little harsh. I think they're doing their clients a disservice. Like, just because the industry doesn't require them to be this way, I think not being this way isn't fair. You have people coming to you for advice and you're only giving them 50% of it. And you're doing it like real estate has always in America been used as a way to build wealth where you live. But it's also like this American dream of like you buy your house and then you pay it off, which also this ship has sailed in modern day, but let's go with it. You buy your house, you pay it off over 30 years, you raise your family there, your family raises its family there, and you have this thing, and then suddenly it's worth times X of what it was, and now we have this whole pile of money that 2 generations from now can live on, right? That was the general idea of home ownership. And so if the whole damn idea was that this thing creates wealth, to just be selling real estate as where, you're going to have Thanksgiving, in my personal opinion, is a cop-out. Like,
mindset is the advice of really what you're delivering.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, I think as anybody, right? Whether you're a property manager or you're a realtor or you're a chef or whatever you do, right? It doesn't even have to be in this. If your goal is to provide a service, then you should probably provide that service. Like, you shouldn't just, like, if you're a chef, right? Like, I'm sorry, we only make eggs here. Okay, what if somebody's allergic to eggs? They don't get to shop at your restaurant. Like, I just don't get that. Like, there's got to be options, and you've got to provide a service. And so I always like people to think about, it really does come back to the real estate or architecture, or whatever you want to call it. It's bricks and wood and pieces and how many bedrooms and whatever. And it's where you're going to have Thanksgiving. And if you don't address both topics, you're not buying or selling knowing what you have. So also, if you want to make more money, you should probably look at both topics. Which goes then back to the width and the architecture of Chicago and my general problem with Chicago's architecture.
Yeah, no, it's a great example. Just think about, we're all familiar with websites, right? They need to be functional, and they need to be, there needs to be usability. They need to be easy to use and clean, etc. Like, and it'd be crazy, like, nah, it's just functional. It looks like crap, like, and then vice versa. It'd be crazy, like, oh, look at this beautiful website, and then like you can't get to where you need to get to.
You can't.
In our modern life, that doesn't exist at all. Like, those scenarios would be preposterous, but in real estate, it's acceptable, and that's crazy.
It's nuts, and which is, I think, why from the start, because I came from architecture, I saw real estate differently, and I from the start saw that it could be together, because I was like, if the bare bones version of real estate is like, you sell the single family home next door to you in your neighborhood, right? I'm like, even that though, like you're building your own equity. So like, I can't even get to a place where like selling real estate doesn't have to do with it being an investment, right? So because even say I own a single family and I sell the one next door to me, the value of the one next door to me impacts me. So I'm just as invested in that sale as I am in my own. And so to not think of it a bit that way, I think just does a disservice to the client. But I think the same thing about an investor, right? Like, if an investor is shopping for, a 3-flat, for example, or a 2-flat or whatever they're shopping for, and they're just thinking about it of like, well, the neighbor's 2-flat sold for $700. Why is mine $800? That, like, no one would ever value it that way, right? It's bed counts, it's bath counts, it's rents that you can get. It's all of the things.
Yeah.
And to just do it like on face value is like insane.
Yeah, I think it's important, everything you're saying there, just along the lines of what the service you're providing and ultimately what the goal of your client is. And the problem is most clients don't even understand everything what you just said or realize what they're doing. It saves them $100 on their payment, and their parents taught them that to buy something because they're wasting their money renting. So I think we add so much value to those type of relationships, and we got to make sure that we're all doing that. So 2023, by the time it's theirs, we'll be halfway through. We already talked about this market's tough. What's the rest of this year look like as far as for investors go in your crystal ball? Here in Chicago.
Yeah. I think I don't think that there's a solution coming anytime soon. And what I mean by that is a lot of times owner occupants become investors when they, leave their condo and buy a single family, and then, they're renting out their condos. People can't afford to do that because they can't afford the mortgage rate on the next thing. So they've got to sell the last thing. And so that does lead to two things, which I guess is an upside for one party. So generally speaking, the rental market, there is no inventory. Rents are very high at the moment. They're not coming down. So if you are a true investor in that you do buy properties to rent them, whether it's 3 doors or 20 doors, congrats, as long as you provide a product that somebody will have some sort of connection to, you will be making very, very good rents. That is also coupled with the point I was making of, the people sitting in condos that then buy a single family and usually would keep their condo as an investment cannot. That leads to the further lack of inventory, which leads to the further increase in pricing of the sort of true investor units. So I think if a true investor can find a way to make his or her margins work, I think the rents are going to be excellent. And I don't see them becoming anything less than excellent anytime soon. Mortgage rates have to go down. I would say probably like 1.5 points for the rental inventory to change. And since that's not happening anytime soon, not at least 5.5%, that's crazy. There's going to be an inventory problem. And so any investor who can find a way to bring inventory to the rental market, as long as it's good inventory, they're gonna be just fine.
Yeah, our lease renewal rate for our properties under management is higher than it's been normally this time of year. So I'm curious to see where that ends up at the end of the year, because I think a lot of people are sticking around because our renewal rates are cheaper than them going out and finding a place, let alone more. So they might maybe not even 100% happy. They just don't want to go deal with alternative at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I manage a few properties for clients. The only way I will manage a rental is if you are a long-time client. But I mean, I literally texted one of the tenants today and I said, here's your renewal rate. It's $100 more than it was. And she goes, can I negotiate? And I said, I mean, you can do whatever you want. But if we go to market, the owner's going to get $300 more. And if you go to the market, you're going to have to pay $300 more. So you can either pay us $100 or you are welcome to go pay $300. That is your business. And everyone is like, okay, you're right. We'll just like, no one is really fighting you, because it's really expensive in the outside world.
Yeah, right now, one of the things we always talk about on the show is, it's hard to build in Chicago. Like, it's hard. One of the side effects of that is there's not a lot of new supply coming here. You look at these other markets like Phoenix and whatever, and they're talking about all the oversupply and what's going to happen. Like, all the red tape that we complain about here, it almost insulates us from, just that glut of supply. Like, it's the demands, like you said, there's nowhere else to go unless we have a complete exodus. The demand is here. Like, if you're in good neighborhoods, the demand is here and it's going to stay strong.
I have a good amount of California, now that I'm selling in California people coming to me and wanting to be investors in Chicago, for that reason.
Yeah.
I like to call Chicago's market like your workhorse. It's not going to go crazy one way or the other. You're not going to get, 400% increase in value in 1 year. But you're also not going to decrease. You are going to be this steady thing that goes along. And in 10 years, there's a big pile of money waiting for you. You can go to Miami and you might make 200% in 1 year. But there's a lot of issues that are coming to Miami that no one's talking about at the moment that have a lot to do with weather and water. That is going to be a problem. And that value is not going to hold forever. Chicago generally has a steady value no matter what, because we have no inventory and we have no way of getting more inventory. And we are just this like, it is what it is. Come here, don't come here.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. Let's Mark, let's wrap on that one right there.
All right. So hopefully you are prepared for our wrap up here.
Yeah, I tried.
All right. So what's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this while others wish they could?
Yeah, I think I just accidentally ended up in the right mindset with the right background. I don't want to say I lucked into it, but like, I just happened to go to architecture school and I happened to decide I didn't want to be an architect, and I happened to decide I hated the architecture field. And I happened to decide all these things that magically got me knowledge without sending me into one direction or the other.
Love it. Well, you can say luck. You could also say, most people in that situation, they look at the money and take it. Regardless of happiness, regardless of what they want to do, they look at the dollar and say, all right, that's the path. Let's do this. Let's make everyone proud.
All right, let's backtrack then. I have an absurd intuition on what will work.
There you go.
There we go.
All right. So you've dropped a lot of good advice on the show. Give us one piece of advice that you would tell someone looking to buy their first property here in Chicago.
Don't buy something you wouldn't live in.
Like it.
All right. What do you do for fun?
Oh God, I don't know. Sleep. Lately sleep has been my fun activity. I have a dog that I'm pretty much obsessed with. So him and I go out into the world. Love to go out to dinners. But I would say most importantly, traveling is like the only way I function. So every like 30 to 45 days, I need to at least go on like a long weekend. Seeing new things. Also, this goes to investors. If you're trying to figure out how to renovate your place and you don't know how to do it and you don't have any ideas, go to a city you've never been to and just go walk around for 3 days.
Good stuff. All right. Give us either a good book, podcast, or a self-development activity that you'd recommend to the listeners.
Can I plug myself?
Yeah, go for it.
I have a podcast that's called For My Last Email. Some new episodes are hopefully coming soon. This is very much a passion project of mine. But so that's a favorite podcast. We'll call it my own. But also I love, this is very not investor friendly. I love all of like the business development podcasts, which I guess is kind of, any kind of podcast that focuses on, entrepreneurship or somebody building a brand or somebody building a product, and bringing it to market. I think all of those are really interesting. And I think actually as a real estate investor, if you use kind of the roadmap they explain to you on how to bring a product to market. You were making a candle, for example, how they went and figured out how to make the candle to bringing it to market and getting people to buy it, and market it. I think if you can learn the lessons they learn on that product, you can do the exact same thing on a property, and be really successful.
Love it. We get locked into our own industries trying to learn how to grow. And I think I would never made it to the point I'm at with GC to finally look at property management. You got to always look at, there's a lot of industries kind of have the same roadmap to where you're trying to get in your specific industry. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
All right. This person is not my industry. This person is just like a random investor in the world. But he has taught me a lot. He's a guy who's an investor. Like he has a different job and he has a career doing something else. But let me pull up his Instagram and plug him. Lucky him. He does buy properties all over the US, but he has a bunch in Chicago as well. And he Airbnbs a lot of them. And he's kind of created a roadmap. And his Instagram is built by Hood. Oh, I'm sorry, built by B Hood.
All right, we'll link to it. And we got to get him on the show now.
No.
That's an immediate solicitation we just got.
I know. I plugged him and he doesn't even know. That's going to be a whole conversation. But yeah, he's great. And he's taught me a lot about the Airbnb world and yeah.
Good stuff. So Michaela, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to the listeners. You mentioned the podcast, which we'll link to. How else can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is MG Home Chicago. How can they provide value to me? Okay. This is what came to mind. I did not think about this until this very moment. So who knows what comes of this, but I am hiring. So I guess if you know anybody who is looking to either get into real estate or design or both, have them shoot me a DM.
All right, we got to have someone shoot her DM. We got 4,000 listeners a week now. Like someone out there is looking to do this. Someone out there is idolizing everything you're saying and saying, yes, I want to be this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, definitely. There's like a lot of growth happening. As I mentioned, I'm now doing this in LA as well. So there's a lot of growth and a lot of coverage that is needed. And so team is growing.
Good stuff. All right, Mark,
Cool.
you ready for a Chicago fact?
Yes, Chicago Fact brought to you by KSN today. And the person we're playing for bought a T-shirt, Dimitri Sandovo. I might butcher that, so sorry, Dimitri. But he bought a T-shirt. So, and one side note here, somebody ordered a trucker hat from Australia last week, so I thought that was cool.
There we go. Nice. I like that you butchered the name, then you just said it the same exact way, just to make sure you didn't change it up. You said it
Yeah,
the same.
it's all about
exact way.
consistency. Yeah, consistent. So,
It's important.
all right, Dimitri.
So
If myself or Michaela get this right, then you get a $50 gift card brought to you by KSN.
nice. So Mark gets first shot, Michaela, then you can jump in as well. So given the architect background, I went with the an architectural question here.
But it's going to be awkward when I don't know it.
It's not an architect shouldn't know. It's just more pop quiz.
Okay, fair enough.
So this Chicago building features fragments taken over from over 150 attractions around the world, including the Great Wall of China, Berlin Wall, and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Which Chicago building is it? And your choices are the Tribune Building, the Merchandise Mart, Hancock, or the Board of Trade.
Board of Trade.
Mark, where are you going with?
I would have said the Tribune Building.
Oh, Mark, you got it.
Yeah.
Dude, I would have done Board of Trade or Merchandise Mart. Those were the two that would have,
Wow.
and all the symbols on the Board of Trade one would have gotten me.
Yeah, so that was my second guess. Now, but before you would even give me options, I was going to say that library right there on Congress or whatever it's called now.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Because I know that was built, the port is in Italy. Like, I know there's crazy stuff that went with that building. I would have guessed that. But
I was waiting for you to give options because I thought it had something to do with oh shit, what's that called? It was in 1893. The big there.
World Exposition.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, what buildings is he going to name that are kind of to do with that? And we'll just like go that route.
all right, Dimitri, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by KSN. We'll get that out to you. Thank you for buying a shirt from the merch store. Michaela, thanks for coming on here today. Tom, thanks as always, listeners. You can visit our merch store and become a participant in our Chicago Fact that we do at the end of every Tuesday tip and every weekly show. So buy something, we'll put your name in the drawing, and you get pulled out and you get announced here, and we'll make you famous or infamous. I don't know, however we want to go for it. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Tom, thanks as always, listeners. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks all.